My brother had a hidden crush on my wife since school. He tried to sabotage our wedding by bringing my ex. In response, I revealed to his pregnant girlfriend that he was unfaithful. In my 20s, life felt simple. My younger brother, Alex, and I had the kind of relationship you'd expect from siblings: friendly ribbing, occasional fights, and shared childhood memories that made us laugh. But in hindsight, I should have seen the signs. As we grew older, the dynamics between us shifted, especially once Mia came back into the picture. Mia and I had been classmates in high school, but we were more acquaintances than friends. She was always in the artsy crowd, attending poetry readings and organizing events, while I was more focused on sports and academics. Alex, on the other hand, was smitten by her even back then. He was bolder than me, always making comments about how he'd end up with a girl like Mia one day. At the time, I thought it was just harmless teenage banter. He never asked her out, so I didn't think much of it. During college, I got into a serious relationship with Olivia, a girl I met during a freshman seminar. She was spontaneous, fun, and at first seemed like a perfect match for me. But the relationship was full of drama, mainly centered around money. I was working 2 part-time jobs while attending classes, trying to keep up with rent and tuition. Olivia, however, never seemed to consider financial responsibility. I'd often find myself footing the bill for our dates, groceries, and even her online shopping sprees. The breaking point came one day when I found out she'd taken out a loan in my name without my consent to fund a trip to Cancun. The betrayal was overwhelming. I ended things with Olivia and decided to take a break from relationships altogether. It felt like a wake-up call, a harsh lesson about trust and boundaries. I promised myself that I'd be more careful next time. A few years later, I ran into Mia at an art event. She was curating a gallery, and I was attending as a favor to a friend. Seeing her again was like a spark reignited. Something just clicked. We spent the rest of the evening catching up, and it felt like no time had passed. The connection was instant, and I found myself drawn to her warmth and authenticity. We started seeing each other more often, and before long, it was clear that this was turning into something serious. Mia had a grounded, kind nature that was refreshing after my turbulent past with Olivia. When I finally introduced Mia to Alex, his reaction was surprising. He seemed a little too excited. "Wow, I can't believe it," he said, a grin spreading across his face. "The Mia from high school? You finally scored, man." I laughed it off, assuming he was just happy for me. He complimented her constantly during dinner, reminiscing about how she used to be the prettiest girl in school. Mia blushed and handled it gracefully, but I noticed a weird energy in the room. I pushed the thought aside, chalking it up to Alex's usual flirty behavior. But things didn't stop there. As Mia and I grew closer, so did Alex. Too close. He started showing up at our dates uninvited. If we planned to see a movie, he'd mysteriously have tickets too. Once, when Mia and I had planned a quiet dinner at home, Alex rang the doorbell with takeout in hand. "I figured we could have a sibling dinner," he said, acting as if it was perfectly normal. Mia tried to be polite, suggesting that maybe he was just lonely, but I could tell she felt a bit uncomfortable. I tried talking to Alex about it once. "You know, Mia and I need some alone time," I said gently. He shrugged, dismissing it. "I know, but I really like hanging out with you guys. You're the closest family I have." I wanted to believe him. He was my brother after all. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more behind his behavior. Then came the subtle manipulations. Alex would make odd comments, usually when Mia wasn't around. "Do you really think you're ready to settle down with her?" he asked me one night after a few beers. It was an unusual question, coming from someone who'd never seemed interested in commitment himself. I brushed it off, laughing. "Of course I am. Why do you ask?" But Alex's questions got more pointed over time. "I mean, it's great that you're happy," he continued, a slight edge in his voice. "But I always thought Mia was more of an artsy type, you know? Not the kind of girl who'd go for someone practical like you." It was a strange comment, and I wasn't sure how to respond. I wondered if he was jealous, or maybe just projecting his own insecurities. Either way, it started to gnaw at me. Mia noticed it too. "Your brother is different," she said one evening, choosing her words carefully. "He seems really invested in our relationship." I shrugged it off, not wanting to alarm her. "He's probably just overprotective," I offered, though I didn't fully believe it myself. Things reached a new level of weird when Alex began texting Mia directly, asking for advice on relationships or sending random memes. It felt invasive, like he was trying to blur the lines between his relationship with me and Mia. I confronted him about it one night, unable to hold back my frustration any longer. "What are you doing, man?" I asked, my voice tinged with annoyance. "Why are you always around?" Alex looked genuinely hurt, which threw me off. "I just miss you," he said softly. I feel like I'm losing you to her. His words stung, but I couldn't deny the truth in them. Maybe I had been so wrapped up in my happiness with Mia that I'd neglected him. But at the same time, I couldn't ignore the uncomfortable feeling that Alex's interest in Mia was more than just brotherly concern. Despite these unsettling developments, I kept trying to make things work. After all, Alex was my brother, and I wanted to believe the best of him. But as Mia and I moved forward with our relationship, I sensed that Alex wasn't done causing trouble. And little did I know, the worst was yet to come. When I proposed to Mia, it was a spontaneous but perfect moment. We were at a small coastal restaurant, sharing dinner during a weekend getaway. The ocean's rhythmic waves were our background music, and I felt an overwhelming sense of certainty. I pulled the ring out of my jacket pocket, got down on one knee, and asked her to marry me. Mia's eyes widened, and tears of joy filled her eyes as she said, "Yes, 1,000 times yes." We hugged tightly, laughing as she slipped the ring onto her finger. It felt like everything in my life was finally aligning. As soon as we got back, we dove into wedding planning. Mia wanted a small, intimate ceremony. Nothing too extravagant, just friends and family in a cozy garden venue. It was exactly what I'd hoped for too. Everything seemed to be coming together, and I felt genuinely happy. A few days after the proposal, I invited Alex over for a drink to share the news. We cracked open a couple of beers in my apartment, and I didn't waste time. "Mia and I are engaged," I announced, unable to hide my grin. Alex paused for a moment, the beer bottle halfway to his mouth. He seemed surprised, but then quickly recovered. "Wow, man, that's congratulations," he said, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. I brushed it off, assuming he was just caught off guard. But as the weeks passed, something changed. Alex's initial enthusiasm started to fade. He was present at family dinners and gatherings, but his interactions felt more forced. I noticed him withdrawing whenever Mia talked about wedding details. I'd expected him to be more involved, maybe even excited. Instead, he became distant, his behavior veering between indifference and quiet resentment. One evening, while Mia and I were planning the guest list, Alex called and asked if I wanted to grab drinks. I agreed, hoping to break through whatever wall had suddenly come between us. We ended up at a familiar dive bar, a place we'd frequented during college. The conversation was light at first, talk about work, sports, and general catching up. But after a few rounds, the atmosphere shifted. With alcohol loosening his tongue, Alex finally broke his silence. He took a long swig from his beer, his eyes a little glassy. "You know," he said slowly, "I always thought Mia and I were meant to be." The words hit me like a punch. I tried to play it off, laughing uncomfortably. "Well, you had your chance," I said, hoping to diffuse the tension. But Alex's expression didn't change. He just stared at me, his gaze piercing. "No, I mean it," he repeated, his voice steadier now. "You're lucky, but this doesn't feel right." His tone wasn't just wistful. It was filled with an unsettling intensity, like he truly believed he'd been robbed of something that was rightfully his. I felt a mix of anger and confusion. Was he serious? Did he actually think he could stake some kind of claim over Mia, as if she were a prize he'd lost? I tried to keep my composure, but my irritation was evident. "Alex, she's happy with me," I said firmly. "And I'm happy with her. It's not about who deserves her. It's about who she chose. And she chose me." Alex's expression softened slightly, but there was still a flicker of something unresolved in his eyes. "I know," he muttered, looking down at his drink. "But it still sucks." The conversation hung heavily between us, and I quickly steered it towards safer topics. But the damage was done. I couldn't unhear what he'd said, nor could I ignore the sense of betrayal that gnawed at me. This wasn't just sibling rivalry. It was a deep-rooted obsession that he'd hidden for years. It made me question everything I thought I knew about him. Over the next few weeks, Alex's behavior grew even stranger. He began making cryptic remarks whenever I mentioned wedding plans. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" he asked me once, out of the blue. Marriage is a big commitment. It's not just about love, it's about sacrifices. His words were layered with a weird bitterness, as if he were trying to plant seeds of doubt. I felt increasingly uneasy around him. One particularly awkward moment happened when Mia and I were at my parents' house for dinner. We were discussing potential wedding venues, excitedly going over our options. Alex, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly interjected. "You know, maybe you should consider postponing," he suggested, sounding oddly serious. "It wouldn't hurt to give it more time." Mia looked taken aback, and I felt my patience snapping. "What are you talking about, Alex?" I asked sharply. "We're not postponing anything." "Why would we?" He shrugged, avoiding eye contact. Just a thought, he muttered. The room fell silent, and my parents exchanged uncomfortable glances. Mia later asked me what Alex's problem was, but I had no clear answer. I think he's just having a hard time adjusting, I offered, but even I didn't believe it. As the wedding date approached, I noticed more signs of Alex's meddling. He tried to insert himself into decision-making, offering unsolicited opinions on everything from the flowers to the seating arrangement. When Mia mentioned wanting her cousin to be part of the bridal party, Alex scoffed. Why not include me? I mean, I am your brother-in-law-to-be, he said with a hint of resentment. I tried to keep things civil, but it was becoming increasingly clear that Alex wasn't just dealing with sibling jealousy. He was actively trying to undermine the wedding. I found myself torn between confronting him head-on or keeping the peace for the sake of the family. The more I observed, the more I realized that Alex's intentions weren't as harmless as they seemed. The turning point came during a family barbecue, just weeks before the wedding. I overheard Alex talking to one of our cousins, and his words chilled me. Mia and I always had a connection, he was saying, his voice low but clear. Sometimes I think she picked the wrong brother. I confronted him as soon as the barbecue was over. What the hell are you doing, Alex? I demanded. This is my wedding, our future. Why can't you just be happy for me? He looked at me, his expression a mix of frustration and something else, something darker. Maybe because I think it's all wrong, he replied bluntly. I've known her longer. I've felt this way for years. You just swooped in and took everything. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You don't get to decide who Mia loves, I shot back. She chose me, and you need to accept that. Alex didn't respond. He just turned and walked away, leaving me fuming and deeply unsettled. I knew then that whatever was coming next wouldn't be good. But I had no idea just how far Alex would go to sabotage the life Mia and I were trying to build together. The day of the wedding arrived with clear skies and a gentle breeze, a perfect backdrop for the beginning of my life with Mia. She looked radiant, her smile lighting up the entire venue as she got ready in her suite. The setting was everything we had imagined. An intimate garden, soft music playing in the background, and our closest friends and family gathered to celebrate. I felt an overwhelming sense of peace, the kind that comes only when everything feels right. I looked in the mirror, adjusting my tie one last time. Today was the day, but the peace was short-lived. As guests started arriving, I mingled with familiar faces and exchanged warm hugs, trying to shake off my lingering nerves. Then, in the midst of the cheerful crowd, I spotted her, Olivia. The sight of my ex felt like a punch to the gut. My first instinct was disbelief. How could she be here? We hadn't spoken in years, and there was no reason for her to attend my wedding. Olivia approached me with a smirk that instantly set off alarm bells. Surprised to see me? She asked, her tone dripping with faux innocence. I could barely contain my frustration. What the hell are you doing here, Olivia? I demanded, trying to keep my voice low enough not to cause a scene. She gave a small laugh. Alex invited me, she said casually, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. My heart raced with a mix of anger and disbelief. I immediately pulled Alex aside, barely managing to keep my temper in check. Why is Olivia here? I hissed. Alex shrugged, trying to play it off as a joke. I thought it'd be fun, he said, his tone annoyingly light. You guys have so much history together. Fun? I could hardly believe what I was hearing. It was my wedding day, my moment with Mia, and Alex had brought my ex-girlfriend as some twisted joke. I felt my face flush with anger, but I couldn't afford to make a scene. This was Mia's day too, and I refused to let Alex's reckless decision ruin it. Despite the chaos brewing beneath the surface, the ceremony began as planned. I stood at the altar, my eyes locked on Mia as she walked down the aisle, her expression full of love and joy. For a brief moment, everything else faded away. But just as the officiant reached the part about objections, Olivia's voice cut through the air. I have something to say, she called out, her tone bold and attention-grabbing. The entire crowd turned toward her, stunned. I felt a wave of dread wash over me. I don't think you really want to do this, Olivia continued, her eyes fixed on me. You're still in love with me, aren't you? A murmur rippled through the guests, and I could feel all eyes on me. My hands clenched in a fist as I tried to control the urge to yell back. This wasn't happening. Not here, not now. But before I could respond, Mia stepped forward. She looked calm, her voice steady as she addressed Olivia. Whatever past you and my husband had, it's over now, Mia said firmly, emphasizing the word husband. I'm not going to let you ruin this day for us. Olivia's bravado wavered, her eyes darting between Mia and me. He's lying to you. She tried again, but her voice lacked the earlier confidence. He still has feelings for me. Mia remained unfazed. Maybe he did once, she acknowledged, but that was a long time ago. He chose me, and I chose him. Now, please leave. Olivia stood there for a moment, unsure of what to do next. The tension was palpable, but Mia's unwavering stance left no room for argument. Defeated, Olivia turned and stormed out of the venue, the echo of her heels fading into the distance. As the ceremony resumed, I tried to focus on Mia, grateful for her strength. But my anger toward Alex simmered beneath the surface. After the vows and the cheers from our guests, I finally had a moment alone with him. I pulled him aside, my voice low and furious. "What the hell were you thinking?" I demanded, my face mere inches from his. Alex looked genuinely guilty, but he still didn't offer an apology. Instead, he muttered, "Maybe this wedding shouldn't have happened." His words hit me harder than Olivia's outburst. This was more than just a misguided attempt at stirring up drama. It was Alex's last-ditch effort to stop the wedding, to prevent me from being with Mia. His jealousy and obsession had reached a level I hadn't anticipated. "Is that what you really want?" I asked, my voice raw with a mix of anger and betrayal. "To ruin this for me?" "For Mia." Alex looked away, his expression a mixture of frustration and something resembling regret. "You don't understand," he said quietly. "I've loved her for years." I felt a sudden wave of sadness. This wasn't just about the wedding. It was about years of unresolved feelings, hidden resentments, and a deep-seated belief that he had been wronged. But this was my wedding day, and I couldn't afford to dwell on the past. "You need to let it go, Alex," I said firmly. "It's over." The reception carried on, the guests seemingly unbothered by the earlier drama. Mia and I danced, cut the cake, and toasted to our future, determined not to let Alex's actions overshadow the joy of the day. But the damage had been done. Even as we smiled for the cameras and posed for photos, I couldn't shake the bitterness lingering at the edges of my mind. Later that night, Mia and I finally had a quiet moment alone. We sat on a bench, overlooking the garden, the string lights casting a soft glow around us. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice gentle but concerned. I let out a heavy sigh. "I am now," I said, "but I'm sorry you had to go through that." Mia squeezed my hand, her eyes warm with understanding. "It's not your fault," she reassured me. "We're here now, and that's what matters." We shared a long, quiet embrace, the chaos of the day slowly fading away. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Alex's actions had revealed a darkness I hadn't fully understood before, a deep-rooted resentment that had festered for years. And as much as I wanted to leave it behind, I couldn't ignore the fact that my own brother had tried to sabotage my happiness. Little did I know, the fallout from Alex's attempt at wedding sabotage was just the beginning. And I wasn't prepared for the choices I'd soon have to make, ones that would change everything. After the wedding, I tried to distance myself from Alex. His attempt to sabotage my marriage had crossed every possible line, and I needed time to process the betrayal. Mia encouraged me to focus on the good, the fact that we were finally married and starting a new chapter. But the bitter taste of Alex's actions lingered. I couldn't just let it go. Things took an unexpected turn when Mia and I received an invitation to a family dinner at my parents' house. I wasn't thrilled about seeing Alex, but I knew I couldn't avoid him forever. When Mia and I arrived, the atmosphere was surprisingly cheerful. As we settled into casual conversations with my parents, I noticed a young woman in the kitchen. She was setting up a salad bowl, her movements careful and deliberate. My mom noticed my confused expression and smiled. "That's Sophie," she said quietly. "Alex's girlfriend." I was caught off guard. I had heard about Sophie in passing, but never met her. Alex hadn't bothered to introduce us. As the evening progressed, Sophie joined us at the table, her face beaming with a warm, genuine smile. She was friendly, kind, and shockingly pregnant. Her bump was small but noticeable, and she was glowing with the excitement of becoming a mother. I couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt. Did she know about Alex's obsession with Mia? Did she have any idea how manipulative he'd been? After dinner, Sophie approached me and Mia with a soft, tentative voice. "It's so nice to finally meet you," she said, her eyes full of sincerity. "Alex always talks about how close you two are." I felt a twinge of anger at Alex's lie. We were far from close now. But Sophie seemed so genuine, so happy in her little bubble, that I couldn't bring myself to say anything. I simply smiled and nodded. "It's nice to meet you too," I said, feeling a mix of pity and protectiveness. I knew she was completely in the dark about who Alex really was. Days later, I found myself alone at my parents' house, helping them clear out some old boxes. Alex wasn't there, which was a relief. But as I worked, I overheard a conversation drifting from the next room. It was coming from Alex's phone, which he had apparently left on speaker. The voice on the other end was unfamiliar, but unmistakably feminine. "Emma, you know I miss you." Alex's voice came through, low and almost pleading. My blood ran cold. "Emma." I stayed still, listening as Alex continued. "I'll be there tomorrow night. Same place as usual. I just need to be careful because of Sophie." My stomach twisted with a mix of disgust and anger. So, not only had Alex tried to destroy my wedding, but he was also cheating on his pregnant girlfriend. The realization hit me like a punch. Sophie was expecting his child, and here he was sneaking around behind her back. I couldn't keep this to myself. I had to decide whether to confront Alex or tell Sophie the truth. Mia was adamant that we couldn't let Sophie go on believing Alex was someone he wasn't. "She deserves to know," Mia insisted. "You can't let her bring a child into a relationship based on lies." I agreed. I knew it would be messy, but I couldn't let Sophie be deceived any longer. So, I reached out to Sophie and asked if we could meet for coffee. She seemed surprised by my sudden invitation, but agreed. We met at a small cafe, and I could tell she was nervous. Her hands fidgeted with her cup, and she kept glancing around as if expecting Alex to walk in at any moment. "Why did you want to meet?" she asked, her voice tentative but curious. I took a deep breath, trying to find the right words. "There are some things you need to know about Alex," I began carefully. "And I'm not telling you this to hurt you. I'm telling you because you deserve the truth." Sophie's eyes widened, but she stayed silent, listening. I started by recounting Alex's behavior leading up to the wedding, his obsession with Mia, and his attempt to sabotage our ceremony. I tried to be as gentle as possible, but the words were heavy. Then, I revealed what I'd overheard about Emma. Sophie's face went pale, her eyes filling with tears. "I knew something was off," she whispered, her voice breaking. "He's been distant, but I thought it was just nerves about the baby." I felt a surge of anger on her behalf. Here was a woman carrying Alex's child, trying to build a future with him, while he was living a double life. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice full of sincerity. "I know this isn't easy to hear, but I thought you deserved to know the truth." Sophie wiped her tears, trying to regain her composure. "Thank you," she said finally. "I needed to hear this. I just wish it wasn't true." Over the next few days, Sophie's world fell apart. She confronted Alex about everything, from his obsession with Mia to his affair with Emma. Alex tried to deny it at first, but Sophie had come prepared. She had gathered proof, including messages and emails between him and Emma. There was no escaping the truth this time. The confrontation was brutal. Sophie confronted Alex at his workplace, creating a scene that became the talk of the office. She publicly accused him of cheating, not only with Emma, but also of emotionally betraying her by obsessing over Mia. Alex tried to deny it, but it was too late. His lies were exposed, and Sophie wasn't willing to back down. The fallout was immediate. Alex lost his job within a week. His employer wasn't interested in keeping someone with such a messy personal life on staff. His reputation, already tarnished by the wedding fiasco, was shattered beyond repair. As for Sophie, she left him, determined to start over on her own. Mia and I offered to support Sophie in any way we could. We felt a sense of responsibility, not just for revealing the truth, but for the well-being of the child Sophie was carrying. "You're not alone in this," Mia assured her one day, during a visit to her new apartment. "We'll help you in any way we can." Sophie's strength was remarkable. She was devastated, of course, but she was also resolute. "I can't believe I was so blind," she admitted one day. "But now I see things clearly. I have to focus on my baby and build a better life." As for Alex, he blamed me for everything: his ruined relationship, lost job, and damaged reputation. "You've destroyed my life," he shouted during one of our last confrontations. But I stood my ground. "No, Alex," I said firmly. "You did that all on your own. I just made sure the truth came out." It was a painful truth for everyone involved, but it was the only way forward. The revelation had shattered the illusions I'd held about Alex and the person he had become. But it had also brought clarity about who I was, who Mia was, and who we wanted to be as a couple. It was a harsh lesson, but one I'd never regret learning. Sophie had always struck me as gentle and soft-spoken, but beneath her kind demeanor, she possessed a surprising strength. After I revealed Alex's betrayal, I wasn't sure how she'd handle it. Part of me feared she'd fall back into denial or try to salvage the relationship. But Sophie was stronger than I'd given her credit for. She decided not to let Alex get away with it. One morning, just a few days after our conversation, I received a call from Sophie. "I'm going to confront him," she said bluntly, her voice steady but filled with resolve. "And I'm doing it at his workplace. He needs to face the consequences." I was stunned. I tried to urge caution. "Are you sure about this?" I asked. "It could get ugly." "Ugly is the only way he'll understand," Sophie replied. I'm done being polite. I couldn't argue with that. So, later that afternoon, Sophie marched into Alex's office, building with a mix of anger and determination. She hadn't called ahead or tried to catch him privately. No, she wanted witnesses. Alex's co-workers were buzzing about her unexpected arrival. Sophie's eyes were focused, her chin raised with defiance as she entered Alex's department. Spotting him at his desk, she walked right up to him without hesitation. The entire office seemed to hold its breath as Sophie raised her voice, breaking the usual hum of workplace chatter. "You thought you could lie your way out of this, didn't you?" she started, her voice clear and loud enough for everyone to hear. Alex looked up, his face turning pale when he realized who was speaking. He rose from his chair, trying to guide Sophie away, but she stood her ground. "Don't even try," she snapped, pushing his hand away. "You've been cheating on me with Emma, sneaking around behind my back while I carried your child. And if that wasn't bad enough, you're still obsessed with Mia, your brother's wife." Gasps rippled through the room as Sophie laid it all out. Alex's co-workers stared, unsure of what to do. Alex tried to play it off, forcing a laugh. "Sophie, let's talk about this privately," he suggested, his voice shaking. But Sophie wasn't done. "You never cared about me, did you?" she demanded, tears now streaming down her face. "I was just a placeholder while you chased after a fantasy. You're pathetic, Alex." Alex's face was a mix of anger, panic, and embarrassment. "It's not what you think," he stammered. But it was too late. Sophie had evidence, text messages, emails, and even a few compromising photos of Alex with Emma. She pulled out her phone, scrolling through the damning evidence as Alex's colleagues craned their necks to catch a glimpse. The scene was beyond humiliating for Alex. His co-workers, who had once seen him as a charming and ambitious guy, now looked at him with disdain. His attempts to defend himself sounded weak and desperate. "You're overreacting," he muttered, but the damage was already done. Sophie's voice cracked, but she didn't back down. "I trusted you," she said, her tone now more sorrowful than angry. "And you threw it all away." Security was eventually called, and Sophie was escorted out, but not before delivering one final line. "You're a liar and a cheater, Alex. You deserve everything that's coming to you." News of the confrontation spread quickly. By the end of the day, everyone in the building had heard about it, and the details had even reached senior management. Alex's boss called him into a meeting the following morning and fired him. "We can't have this kind of scandal attached to our company," his boss told him flatly. In less than a week, Alex's entire world came crashing down. He lost his job, his reputation, and his relationship. He tried to spin the narrative to our parents, claiming that Sophie had overreacted and that I had orchestrated everything. But they weren't buying it. They'd heard enough from Sophie herself and seen the evidence she presented. The fallout left Alex isolated. Friends distanced themselves from him, unwilling to be associated with his disgrace. Our parents were devastated, unsure how to process what their son had become. It was the first time I'd seen my father cry. "I raised you better than this," he told Alex, his voice thick with disappointment. I watched all of this unfold with a mix of emotions. On one hand, there was a sense of satisfaction. Alex's actions had finally caught up with him, and the truth was out in the open. I felt a strange kind of justice, one that had been long overdue. But alongside that satisfaction was a deep sense of guilt. Alex was still my brother, and watching him hit rock bottom was harder than I expected. One evening, I got a call from Alex. His voice was raw, filled with a desperation I'd never heard before. "You're happy now, aren't you?" he accused, his words slurred with the weight of alcohol. "You've ruined everything for me." My response was steady but sad. "I didn't ruin anything, Alex. You did this to yourself." There was silence on the other end, then a bitter laugh. "You always think you're better than me," he spat. "But you've just taken everything away. My job, my relationship, my life." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my own emotions in check. "I didn't take anything, Alex," I said firmly. "You had the chance to build something good with Sophie, and you threw it away. You made your choices." But even as I spoke those words, I felt a pang of regret. Maybe I could have handled things differently. Maybe I could have confronted him privately instead of involving Sophie. But the damage was done. I couldn't change the past, only learn from it. Mia, always my anchor, reminded me that I'd done the right thing. You exposed the truth, and that's not something to feel guilty about, she said, her hand resting gently on my shoulder. Alex needed a wake-up call, even if it came with a harsh cost. Still, the weight of it all lingered. I had no intention of reconciling with Alex anytime soon, but I couldn't deny the loss I felt. He was family, and now we were strangers. As I tried to move forward, I found myself constantly reflecting on what family truly meant. Was it about loyalty at any cost, or was it about holding each other accountable? I still wasn't sure. But one thing was clear. I wasn't willing to compromise my integrity. Not for Alex, not for anyone. Alex's downward spiral had left a deep impact on everyone involved. Despite being responsible for his own downfall, he directed all his anger at me. He couldn't or wouldn't see that his actions had led him here. It was easier for him to paint me as the villain in his story. In his eyes, I was the one who had taken everything from him. His relationship with Sophie, his job, and what little respect he had left. "You've destroyed my life," he yelled during one of our last conversations. His voice was filled with a mix of anger and desperation. "You could have handled it differently. But no, you had to ruin me." I remained calm, though my heart ached hearing my brother's words. "I didn't destroy your life, Alex," I replied. "You did that yourself. I just told the truth." But I knew there was no point in arguing with him. His perspective was clouded by bitterness, and I had no power to change that. As much as I wanted to find some middle ground, I couldn't force him to accept responsibility. Meanwhile, Mia and I focused on moving forward. Sophie, now alone and pregnant, was understandably devastated. Mia took the lead in offering support, constantly checking in and making sure Sophie wasn't struggling financially or emotionally. We even helped her set up a small nursery in her new apartment. One evening, Mia and I sat in Sophie's living room, surrounded by stacks of baby clothes and unopened boxes of diapers. Sophie's eyes were puffy from crying, but there was a determined resolve in her voice. "I never imagined I'd be doing this alone," she admitted, her hand resting gently on her growing belly. "But I'm grateful for you both. I don't know how I'd manage without your help." Mia reached out and squeezed Sophie's hand. "You're stronger than you think," she said. "You've already made it this far, and we'll be here for whatever you need." I nodded in agreement, feeling a strange sense of responsibility for Sophie's situation. While Alex's betrayal wasn't my fault, I couldn't help but feel a duty to support the person he had hurt the most. Sophie's gratitude was palpable, but I could also sense her lingering pain. The betrayal was still fresh, and no amount of reassurance could completely erase that. Mia remained my constant support through it all. She reminded me of the importance of honesty, even when the truth was painful. "You did the right thing," she assured me one night as we lay in bed, her voice gentle but firm. "You can't control Alex's choices, but you can protect the people he's hurt." I nodded, but it wasn't easy to shake off the guilt. "I know," I said, my voice heavy, "but it's hard not to feel like I've lost him for good." Mia's eyes softened as she turned to face me. "You didn't lose him," she whispered. "He lost himself, and maybe one day he'll realize that." Her words were comforting, but I couldn't help wondering if there was more I could have done. Maybe an earlier confrontation or a different approach to exposing the truth. The what-ifs haunted me, even as I tried to let them go. In the weeks that followed, my parents struggled to process everything that had happened. They were disappointed in Alex, but they also struggled to understand my role in the fallout. My father, in particular, tried to maintain some semblance of peace between us. "He's still your brother," he said during one of our conversations. "Family is complicated, and forgiveness takes time." I understood where my father was coming from, but the wound was too fresh. "I know, Dad," I replied, "but forgiveness has to come from him too, and I'm not sure he's ready for that." My mother's reaction was more conflicted. She was torn between defending Alex and acknowledging the damage he'd caused. "He's made terrible mistakes," she admitted one evening, her voice heavy with sadness. "But I just wish things didn't have to come to this." I wanted to comfort her, but I couldn't offer false hope. "I wish it didn't have to be this way either, Mom," I said quietly. But it was never going to change unless someone spoke up. As for Alex, he was still spiraling. He refused to accept any responsibility, choosing instead to isolate himself. He cut off most communication with our family and distanced himself from the few friends who hadn't already abandoned him. He even tried reaching out to Mia a few times, sending messages filled with thinly veiled bitterness. Mia showed me the messages, and I could see his desperation. "Why did you choose him over me?" he wrote in one of them. Mia didn't respond. She deleted the messages and blocked his number, refusing to engage with his attempts to reopen old wounds. "He's not well," she said simply. "And until he gets help, I won't be part of his delusions." It was a painful truth, but one I had to accept. Alex wasn't just dealing with the fallout of his actions. He was consumed by a sense of loss and betrayal that he couldn't process. It became clear that he wasn't just angry at me. He was angry at himself, at Mia, and at the life he believed should have been his. Despite the chaos, Mia and I found moments of peace. We focused on strengthening our relationship, determined not to let Alex's actions define our happiness. We took long walks, talked about the future, and began making plans for a family of our own someday. It felt like a slow but meaningful healing process. Sophie also found strength in moving forward. She joined a support group for single mothers and began preparing for her baby's arrival with cautious optimism. We remained close, often inviting her over for dinner or helping her with errands. Watching her resilience was both inspiring and humbling. Despite everything she'd endured, she was determined to give her child a loving and stable environment. One evening, as Mia and I sat with Sophie in her living room, she spoke words that left a lasting impression. "I never thought I'd be grateful for what happened," she admitted, her voice soft but sincere. "But I am, in a way. It forced me to see the truth and make better choices for myself and my baby." Her perspective helped me let go of some of the guilt. It reminded me that the truth, no matter how painful, had set us all free in different ways. Alex's deception had been exposed. Sophie was on a path to healing, and Mia and I were building a life rooted in honesty. But as much as I tried to pick up the pieces, the weight of losing my brother still lingered. I knew reconciliation was a distant possibility, but I also understood that some wounds take time, if they heal at all. In the end, I realized that the only thing I could control was my own choices. I chose to support those who were willing to grow, to love those who were open to healing, and to protect the life Mia and I were creating. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and that was enough for me. I never thought my relationship with Alex would end this way. He had always been a constant in my life, even when things got messy. We were brothers, bound by blood and history. But now, the bond felt severed, and the reality of cutting ties was both unsettling and liberating. Life has a strange way of forcing you to confront the truth, no matter how painful. And the truth was, I had chosen honesty over the comfort of denial, even if it meant losing Alex. It was a decision I didn't take lightly, but as the dust settled, I knew I'd rather live with the rawness of the truth than maintain the facade that everything was fine. Mia and I were focused on moving forward. The past months had been tumultuous, but they'd also brought us closer together. We talked openly about starting a family, something that had been a distant dream before all the drama with Alex. We were planning a future rooted in transparency and trust, knowing that we'd come out stronger on the other side of the chaos. We made a conscious effort to be part of Sophie's life as well. It wasn't just about offering help. It was about giving her the support she deserved. We visited her regularly, bringing over groceries, assembling baby furniture, and helping her set up a cozy nursery in her small apartment. Sophie's gratitude was heartwarming, but there was also a tinge of sadness behind her smiles, a reminder of everything she had lost and how quickly her life had changed. One afternoon, as Mia and I were setting up a crib in Sophie's living room, she spoke candidly about her feelings. "I still have days where I miss the Alex I thought I knew," she confessed, her voice tinged with a mix of regret and acceptance. "But I'm also grateful for the clarity. At least now, I know what I need to do, for myself and for my baby." Her words resonated deeply. It was a bittersweet truth we all shared. The pain of betrayal balanced by the freedom that comes with facing reality. It wasn't the ending any of us had imagined, but it was the closure we needed. As the weeks turned into months, Alex remained a distant presence. I'd hear snippets about him from mutual friends or my parents, news that he was trying to rebuild his life, finding odd jobs here and there. But he wasn't in a good place. I occasionally wondered if I should reach out, extend an olive branch, or even just check on him. But each time I hesitated. I wasn't ready, and maybe he wasn't either. One day, my father called me, his voice heavy with emotion. "Your brother's struggling," he admitted. "He blames you for a lot of things, but deep down, I think he knows he messed up. He's just not ready to admit it yet." I let out a slow breath, unsure of what to say. "I didn't want this, Dad," I said quietly. But I couldn't let it continue either. "I know," he replied, "and I don't blame you. I just hope that, one day, you two can find a way back to each other." It was a hope I shared, even if I couldn't fully believe in it just yet. The pain was still too raw, the wounds too fresh. But maybe time could do what words couldn't. Mia was my anchor through all of this. She never wavered, always reminding me that I'd done the right thing, even if it meant making difficult choices. One evening, as we sat on our porch with the setting sun casting a warm glow over our small garden, she turned to me and said, "You know, I'm proud of you. For being honest, for protecting Sophie, and for not compromising your integrity." Her words were comforting, but I couldn't help but feel a lingering sense of loss. "I just wish it didn't have to come to this," I admitted. "I always thought Alex and I would be in each other's lives, no matter what." Mia nodded, her eyes filled with understanding. "Sometimes the hardest part of doing what's right is accepting what you lose in the process." Sophie's baby, a boy she named Noah, arrived a few weeks later. Holding the tiny bundle in my arms, I felt a surge of hope. It was a symbol of new beginnings, a chance to build something positive from the wreckage Alex had left behind. Sophie's tears of joy were a welcome change from the tears of betrayal she'd shed only months earlier. "Thank you for everything," she said, her voice filled with genuine gratitude. "I wouldn't have made it this far without you too." As I looked into baby Noah's wide, innocent eyes, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. Life had taken unexpected turns, but it had also brought unexpected gifts. The love I had for Mia, the bond we were building with Sophie and her son, and the clarity that came from living authentically were all things I cherished deeply. But even amid the new beginnings, there were moments when I missed Alex. I missed the brother I grew up with, the one I'd shared childhood adventures and teenage secrets with. It was hard to reconcile that person with the man he had become, the one consumed by jealousy and dishonesty. I wondered if someday we might find a way to reconnect. But I also knew that reconciliation could only come if Alex was willing to accept responsibility for his actions. One evening, as Mia and I were preparing dinner, my phone buzzed with a message from Alex. It was short and simple. "I'm sorry. I know I messed up. Maybe one day we can talk." I stared at the message for a long time, unsure of how to respond. It was a small step, but it was also the first sign of acknowledgement from Alex. I didn't know if it was genuine or just another attempt to shift the narrative, but it was something. I showed the message to Mia, who offered a gentle smile. "It's a start," she said. I nodded, still uncertain about the path ahead. "Maybe it is," I agreed. For now, I didn't respond. I needed more time to heal, more space to process everything that had happened. But I knew that the door wasn't completely closed, not if Alex was willing to change. As Mia and I sat down to dinner, I felt a sense of peace that had been missing for a long time. It wasn't the ending I'd imagined for my relationship with Alex, but it was the one I'd accepted. And in a way, it was the closure I needed. Life was moving forward, and so was I, one step at a time, with Mia by my side and the hope of better days ahead. Maybe, one day, reconciliation would be possible. But for now, I was content knowing that I had done what was right, even if it had come at a heavy cost.